October 2016. The morning Marcus Webb left for his hunting trip, the sky over Boone hung low and grey, pregnant with the promise of early winter. Sarah stood at the kitchen window of their modest two-story home on Laurel Creek Road, watching her husband load his gear into the back of his Ford F-150. The truck bed already held his weathered canvas tent, sleeping bag, propane stove, and the cooler she had packed the night before with sandwiches, apples, and bottles of water. Marcus moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had made this trip dozens of times before. At 42, he still had the lean, muscular build of someone who spent more time outdoors than in, his sun-weathered face framed by dark hair just beginning to show threads of silver at the temples. He wore his favorite hunting jacket, the camouflage pattern faded from years of use, and the boots Sarah had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. Their daughter Emma appeared beside Sarah at the window, still in her pajamas despite it being nearly 7 in the morning. At 15, she had her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, currently narrowed with teenage concern. "He's going to the same spot as always, right?" Emma asked, her breath fogging the glass. "Same spot," Sarah confirmed, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Up near Grandfather Mountain, that clearing he found about 5 years back. You know your dad? He's superstitious about his hunting spots." Marcus had discovered the location during a solo expedition, a small clearing surrounded by dense hardwoods about 8 miles from the nearest Forest Service road. He claimed it was perfect, positioned along a game trail where deer and elk moved during the early morning and late evening hours. Over the years, it had become his private sanctuary, the place he retreated to when he needed to think, to breathe, to remember who he was beyond husband and father and the assistant manager at Boone Hardware. Sarah watched as Marcus secured a tarp over his gear with practiced knots. She felt the familiar mixture of emotions his trips always stirred in her. A small part of her envied his ability to simply leave, to spend 3 days alone with nothing but the mountains and his thoughts. Another part worried, though she tried not to show it. The Appalachian wilderness was vast and indifferent, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Marcus looked up and saw them watching, his face split into that familiar grin, the one that had first caught Sarah's attention 16 years ago, when they met at a bluegrass festival in Blowing Rock. He waved, beckoning them to come out. The October air bit through Sarah's thin sweater as she and Emma stepped onto the porch. The mountains that ringed their small town were already showing their full autumn colors, brilliant reds and golds and oranges that seemed to glow even under the overcast sky. "You two look like you're sending me off to war," Marcus laughed, pulling them both into a hug. He smelled like coffee and the cedar soap he always used. "It's 3 days, same as always." "We know," Emma said, her voice muffled against his jacket, "but you don't have any cell service up there." "That's the point, kiddo," Marcus said, ruffling her hair in a way that would have annoyed her from anyone else. 3 days of nothing but trees, silence, and maybe a nice buck if I'm lucky. I'll be back Sunday evening, and you can tell me all about your debate tournament." Emma was set to compete in a regional debate competition that weekend, something she had been anxious about for weeks. Marcus had promised to help her practice when he returned, running through her arguments and playing devil's advocate, the way only he could. "You sure you don't want to wait until after Halloween?" Sarah asked, not for the first time. "Emma's school is doing that haunted house fundraiser on Saturday. She wanted you there." Something flickered across Marcus's face, an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. "I know, and I'm sorry, Em. But I already got the time off work, and the weather's supposed to turn next week, heavy rains. This is really my last good window before deer season officially opens and the woods get crowded." He was right, of course. Marcus had been planning this trip for months, carefully watching weather patterns and moon phases. Sarah knew better than to push. Besides, he had never given her a reason to worry before. He was careful, experienced, and respectful of the mountains, in a way that only someone who had grown up among them could be. "Did you pack the GPS beacon?" Sarah asked, her standard question. Marcus patted his jacket pocket. "Right here, plus the satellite phone, compass, first aid kit, and enough freeze-dried food to last a week if something goes wrong, and nothing is going to go wrong." He kissed Sarah then, long and tender, his hand cupping the back of her neck in that way that still made her stomach flutter after all these years. When he pulled back, his brown eyes held hers with an intensity that seemed odd for such a routine goodbye. "I love you," he said, "both of you, more than anything in this world." "We love you too," Sarah replied, feeling a strange tightness in her chest that she attributed to the autumn chill. "Be safe up there." Marcus climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling to life with a familiar growl. He waved once more as he backed down the driveway, and then he was gone, the truck disappearing around the corner where Laurel Creek Road wound down toward Highway 105. Sarah and Emma stood on the porch for a moment longer, listening to the sound of the engine fade into the general morning noise of their neighborhood waking up. Somewhere, a dog barked. A school bus hissed to a stop a few blocks away. The wind rustled through the maple tree in their front yard, sending a shower of red leaves onto the grass Marcus had mowed just 2 days before. "Come on," Sarah said finally, giving Emma's shoulder a squeeze. "You need to get ready for school, and I need to get ready for work." They went back inside and life continued in the way it always did. Sarah worked her shift at the Watauga County Medical Center, where she was a nurse in the emergency department. Emma attended her classes at Watauga High School, sitting through lectures on American history and calculus, eating lunch with her friends, worrying about the debate tournament. That evening they ordered pizza and watched a movie together, the house feeling slightly too quiet without Marcus's presence. Saturday morning arrived cool and crisp, perfect October weather. Emma left early for her debate tournament in Winston-Salem, carpooling with 3 other students and their coach. Sarah spent the day catching up on household chores, grocery shopping, and trying not to think about how much she missed having Marcus around, even for just a few days. Sunday came. Sarah made a pot roast for dinner, Marcus's favorite, timing it so it would be ready around 6 o'clock when he usually returned from these trips. She and Emma set the table together, Marcus's place already laid with his preferred beer glass, and the napkin folded the way he liked it. 6 o'clock passed. Then 7. Sarah told herself not to worry. Sometimes Marcus got a late start heading back, especially if he was in the middle of field dressing a kill when the afternoon light began to fade. By 8 o'clock, Sarah's stomach had begun to knot with anxiety. She tried calling Marcus's cell phone, knowing it was useless. As he had said, there was no service up where he camped. The calls went straight to voicemail, his familiar voice telling her to leave a message. Maybe he decided to stay an extra night, Emma suggested, though her own voice betrayed her worry. You know how Dad gets when he's up there, loses track of time. Maybe, Sarah agreed, but Marcus had never done that before. He was punctual to a fault, always back when he said he would be. By 10 o'clock, Sarah's worry had crystallized into genuine fear. She called the Watauga County Sheriff's Department, explaining the situation to the dispatcher, in a voice that remained remarkably calm despite the panic building in her chest. "How long has he been gone?" the dispatcher asked. "Since Friday morning. He was supposed to be back this evening. And he's an experienced outdoorsman. Very experienced. He's been hunting and camping in these mountains his whole life." "All right, Ma'am. It's probably nothing to worry about yet. Folks lose track of time in the woods all the time, but let's get some information down just to be safe." The dispatcher took down the details. Marcus's full name, age, physical description, what he was wearing, where he was camping, what kind of vehicle he was driving. She assured Sarah that they would send a deputy out to check the Forest Service road where Marcus typically parked, and if his truck was still there by morning, they would initiate a search. Sarah barely slept that night. She lay in bed listening to every sound, hoping to hear the rumble of Marcus's truck in the driveway, his key in the lock, his footsteps on the stairs, but the house remained silent, except for the settling of old wood and the distant hoot of an owl in the trees behind their property. Monday morning arrived grey and cold. Sarah called in sick to work, something she rarely did. Emma went to school, though Sarah could see the fear in her daughter's eyes as she left. The sheriff's department called at 9:15. "Mrs. Webb, this is Deputy Carson. We found your husband's truck." Sarah's heart leaped. "Is he there? Is he all right?" "The truck's here, but there's no sign of your husband. The vehicle is locked, and from what we can see, all his camping gear is gone. Looks like he headed into the woods as planned. We're organizing a search party now." "How soon can you get up here?" Sarah made the drive to the Forest Service road in a blur, barely registering the winding mountain roads, the thick stands of trees pressing in from both sides. Deputy Carson met her at the trailhead, a young man with a serious face and kind eyes. Marcus's truck sat in the small gravel pullout exactly where he always parked it, looking perfectly normal except for the fact that her husband was not there. "We've got search and rescue on the way," Deputy Carson explained. "We're calling in volunteers from the county, and we've contacted the North Carolina search and rescue teams. We're also bringing in tracking dogs. Mrs. Webb, I need you to tell me everything you know about where your husband planned to camp and what his itinerary was." Sarah walked them through it, her voice mechanical. Marcus's usual route, 8 miles in, following an old logging road for the first 3 miles, then cutting northeast through dense forest, following the ridgeline until he reached the clearing. He always set up camp in the same spot, a level area near a small creek that ran down from higher elevations. By noon, nearly 40 volunteers had gathered, along with professional search and rescue personnel in their bright orange vests. They spread out in a coordinated grid pattern, moving into the forest in groups of 4 or 5, calling Marcus's name, looking for any sign of his passage. Sarah waited at the trailhead with Emma, who had been pulled out of school. Other wives and mothers from their community arrived to sit with them, bringing thermoses of coffee and words of hollow comfort. Everyone knew someone who had gotten lost in these mountains. Usually they were found within 24 hours, cold and embarrassed but otherwise fine. But as the afternoon wore on and the searchers began returning to report their findings, or lack thereof, a grim reality began to set in. They had found Marcus's campsite exactly where Sarah said it would be. The tent was set up, his sleeping bag rolled out inside, his camp stove and cooking supplies neatly arranged, but there was no sign of Marcus himself. What disturbed the searchers more than his absence was the state of the camp. The tent flap hung open, moving in the wind. Inside, Marcus's supplies were scattered as though he had left in a hurry. His rifle was still there, leaning against a tree. His GPS beacon, which he had promised Sarah he would carry at all times, lay in the dirt near the cold fire pit. "It's like he just stepped away from camp for a minute and never came back," the search and rescue coordinator told Sarah as the sun began to set on that first day. "We'll keep looking, Mrs. Webb. We'll keep looking until we find him." They searched for 3 days, then a week, then 2 weeks. The operation grew to include over 100 volunteers, helicopters with thermal imaging cameras, and some of the best tracking dogs in the state. They combed through hundreds of acres of dense forest, checked every ravine, every cave, every place a person might fall or become trapped. They found nothing. No blood, no torn clothing, no tracks beyond the immediate area around his campsite. It was as though Marcus Webb had simply ceased to exist the moment he stepped away from his tent. The local news covered the story extensively. Marcus's face appeared on television screens across western North Carolina, a smiling photo from the previous summer, asking anyone with information to contact the sheriff's department. The community rallied around the Webb family, organizing fundraisers, prayer vigils, and volunteer search parties that continued long after the official search was called off. But as October turned to November, and November gave way to December, hope began to fade. The weather turned cold and wet, then snowy, burying the forest under a white blanket that would last until spring. Any trace Marcus might have left would be long gone by the time the snow melted. Sarah found herself trapped in a nightmare that had no end. Her husband was simply gone, vanished into the mountains he had loved so much, and no one could tell her what had happened. The not knowing was torture. She could not mourn because she did not know if he was dead. She could not hope because with each passing day, the likelihood of him being found alive diminished to near impossibility. The house felt wrong without him. His clothes still hung in the closet. His toothbrush still sat in the holder by the bathroom sink. His coffee mug, the one that said "World's okayest dad" that Emma had given him as a joke, remained on the shelf where he had left it. Sarah could not bring herself to move these things, to erase the evidence of his existence, because doing so felt like admitting he was never coming back. Emma retreated into herself, her grades slipping, her friendships withering. She stopped going to debate practice. She would come home from school and go straight to her room, emerging only for dinner, which she picked at without eating. Sarah recognized the signs of depression, but felt helpless to address them when she was drowning in her own grief and uncertainty. The sheriff's department kept the case open, but as winter deepened, their calls became less frequent. They had done everything they could, they said. Sometimes people were simply never found in these mountains. The wilderness was vast and unforgiving, full of places a body might lie undiscovered for years, decades, or forever. Christmas came and went, a hollow mockery of the holiday. Sarah went through the motions for Emma's sake, putting up a small tree, wrapping a few presents, cooking a ham that neither of them felt like eating. They sat in the living room on Christmas morning, Marcus's absence a presence more real than anything else in the house. "Do you think he's still alive?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice small and young, in a way it had not been for years. Sarah wanted to lie to offer comfort, but she found she could not. "I don't know, baby, I really don't know." That was the truth of it. Sarah existed in a state of terrible suspension, unable to move forward or back, waiting for an answer that might never come. She returned to work because the bills had to be paid, mechanically performing her duties in the emergency department while feeling dead inside. She attended the grief support group the hospital counselor recommended, sitting in a circle with other people who had lost loved ones, but their losses were confirmed. Their people were buried or cremated. They had bodies, certainty, closure. Sarah had nothing but questions. The seasons turned. Spring brought the searchers back, volunteers who had not forgotten, who still hoped that the melting snow might reveal what had been hidden. They found nothing. Summer arrived hot and humid, the mountains lush and green, beautiful and terrible in their indifference. Fall came again, the leaves turning the same brilliant colors they had been when Marcus left, and Sarah felt the year complete its circle, bringing her back to the beginning of her nightmare. 1 year became 2, 2 became 3. The calls from the sheriff's department stopped altogether. The case remained open, but it was cold now, filed away with all the other unsolved disappearances, the other people who had walked into the Appalachian wilderness and never walked out. Sarah learned to live with the uncertainty, though it never stopped hurting. She learned to say, "My husband is missing," instead of "My husband died," because she still did not know if he was dead. She learned to endure the pitying looks from people in town, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. She learned to be both mother and father to Emma, who grew from a troubled teenager into a young woman carrying the weight of unresolved grief. Life continued because it had to. Sarah worked her shifts at the hospital. Emma graduated high school and started at Appalachian State University, staying close to home, unable to leave despite the pain the town held. They moved through their days like ghosts, and the empty place at their dinner table never filled. 7 years passed. 7 years of not knowing, of waiting, of the terrible hope that refused to die, no matter how much logic said it should. Sarah was 44 now, with more grey in her hair and lines around her eyes that had not been there before. Emma was 22, studying psychology, perhaps trying to understand the trauma that had shaped half her life. And then, on an overcast afternoon in late October 2023, 7 years and 2 weeks after Marcus Webb walked into the forest and disappeared, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Watauga County Sheriff's Department, and for a moment, Sarah's world stopped. She had not seen that name on her phone in over 3 years. Her hand shook as she answered. "Hello? Mrs. Webb?" The voice was unfamiliar, younger than Deputy Carson had been. "This is Deputy Martinez with the Watauga County Sheriff's Department. Ma'am, I need you to sit down. We've found your husband. He's alive." The words made no sense. Sarah heard them, understood each one individually, but strung together they formed an impossible sentence that her mind refused to process. "What did you say?" she whispered. "Your husband, Marcus Webb. We found him. He's alive, Mrs. Webb. He's at Watauga Medical Center right now. They're checking him over, but he's breathing, he's conscious. Ma'am, are you there?" Sarah realized she had stopped breathing. She sucked in air, her vision swimming, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "That's not possible. It's been 7 years. I know, ma'am, I know how this sounds, but it's him. We verified his identity through fingerprints and dental records. It's definitely Marcus Webb. How soon can you get to the hospital?" Sarah was already moving, grabbing her keys from the hook by the door, her purse from the kitchen counter. Her mind raced ahead, trying to make sense of the impossible. Marcus was alive. After 7 years, her husband was alive. "I'm on my way," she said. "Where was he? How did you find him?" Some urban explorers were poking around an old abandoned property up in Meat Camp, about 15 miles from where your husband originally disappeared. There's an old well on the property, been dry for probably 50 years. They heard sounds coming from inside it and called us. When we got there and looked down with flashlights, we saw him at the bottom. Ma'am, I'm going to be straight with you. He's not in good shape. He's severely malnourished and dehydrated, but he's alive." Sarah's hands shook so badly she could barely get her key into the ignition. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. She called Emma as she drove, her daughter's voice thick with sleep. It was just after 2 in the afternoon, which meant Emma had probably been up late studying. "Mom, what's wrong?" "They found your father." Sarah's voice broke on the words. "Emma, they found him. He's alive. He's at the hospital." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Sarah thought the call had dropped. Then Emma made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, a noise of pure disbelief. "That's not funny, Mom. I'm not joking, baby. The sheriff's department just called. Get to Watauga Medical as fast as you can. I'm already on my way." Sarah ended the call before Emma could respond, needing both hands to navigate the familiar roads that suddenly seemed strange and surreal. Nothing felt real. The world had tilted on its axis, and Sarah could not find her balance. The hospital parking lot was a blur. Sarah barely remembered getting out of her car, walking through the sliding doors of the emergency department, where she had worked for nearly 20 years. Her co-workers stared at her as she rushed past the nurses' station, and she realized that, of course, they knew. In a hospital this size, in a town this small, everyone would already know that Marcus Webb had been found. Deputy Martinez was waiting for her outside one of the trauma bays, a young Hispanic man with kind eyes and a serious expression. He stood when he saw her approaching. "Mrs. Webb, he's in there. The doctors are still examining him, but they said you could see him." He paused, his expression troubled. "Mrs. Webb, I need to prepare you. He's not the same as he was. 7 years is a long time, and we don't know what he's been through. He's having trouble communicating. The doctors aren't sure yet if it's physical or psychological, but he's not really talking. Just says a few words here and there. Most of them don't make much sense." Sarah barely heard him. She pushed past the deputy and through the door into the trauma bay. The man on the gurney was unrecognizable. He was skeletal, his skin stretched tight over prominent bones, his cheeks hollow and his eyes sunken deep into his skull. His hair, which had been dark with just a touch of grey when he disappeared, was now completely white and hung past his shoulders in matted tangles. His beard, equally white, reached halfway down his chest. His skin was covered in dirt and what looked like old scars, strange patterns that might have been scratches or burns or something else entirely, but it was his eyes that stopped Sarah in her tracks. They were the same brown eyes she had looked into on their wedding day, the same eyes that had watched Emma take her first steps, the same eyes that had met hers across the kitchen table on 1,000 ordinary mornings. Those eyes found her now, and something flickered in their depths. Recognition, maybe, or fear. "Marcus." Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. The man on the gurney turned his head toward her. His lips moved, cracked and bleeding, and a sound came out that might have been her name. Sarah moved forward on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. A doctor was on the other side of the bed, checking Marcus's vital signs, making notes on a tablet. The doctor glanced up at Sarah and she recognized him. Dr. Chen, one of the ER physicians she had worked with dozens of times. "Sarah," Dr. Chen said quietly, "I'm glad you're here." "Is it really him?" She needed to hear it said again, needed confirmation that this was not some cruel hallucination brought on by 7 years of grief. Fingerprints match, dental records match. "It's him." Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but grave. "Sarah, he's in serious condition. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, exposure injuries. His core body temperature was dangerously low when they brought him in. We've got him on IV fluids and we're slowly warming him up, but there's going to be a long recovery process here." "What happened to him? Where has he been?" Dr. Chen shook his head. "We don't know yet. He's not coherent enough to give us a clear account. He seems to understand when we talk to him, but his responses are fragmented. We're going to do a full neurological workup once he's stable, but right now, we're focused on keeping him alive." Sarah reached out with a trembling hand and touched Marcus's arm. His skin was cold, papery, covered in grime that would take days to fully wash away. At her touch, he flinched, his eyes going wide with something that looked like panic. "It's okay," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "It's me, it's Sarah. You're safe now, you're home." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw tears begin to track through the dirt on his face. His lips moved again, and this time the words were just barely audible. "Not home, never home again." Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open and Emma rushed in, her face flushed from running, her eyes wild and desperate. She stopped short when she saw the man on the gurney, her hand flying to her mouth. "Dad?" The word came out broken, uncertain. Marcus's head turned toward his daughter, and something changed in his expression. For just a moment, Sarah saw the man she had married, the father who had pushed Emma on swings and taught her to ride a bike, and stayed up late helping with science projects. His hand lifted slightly from the bed, reaching toward Emma with fingers that trembled. "Emma, my Emma, so big now, so much time." Emma moved forward slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, and took her father's hand. It was skeletal in hers, all bone and tendon, but she held it gently. Tears streamed down her face. "Where were you, Daddy? Where have you been?" Marcus's eyes squeezed shut and his whole body tensed. When he spoke again, his voice was raspy and strange, as if he had forgotten how to properly form words. "Down, always down, dark and cold, voices in the stone, they kept me, fed me just enough, showed me things no one should see." Sarah exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen, who frowned and made another note on his tablet. Delusions, perhaps. Trauma-induced psychosis. After 7 years of God knew what, it would be a miracle if Marcus's mind was intact. "We're going to admit him," Dr. Chen said. "Get him stable, run comprehensive tests. Sarah, I know you want answers, and believe me, so do we. But right now we need to focus on his physical health. The psychological evaluation will come later." Over the next few hours, Sarah and Emma watched as the hospital staff worked to stabilize Marcus. They moved him to a private room in the intensive care unit, started him on nutrition supplements through his IV, and began the slow process of trying to bring him back from the edge of starvation. A nurse carefully began cleaning the worst of the grime from his skin, revealing more of those strange markings underneath. They looked almost like symbols, Sarah thought, geometric patterns that had been either carved or burned into his flesh. The sheriff's department wanted to interview Marcus as soon as possible, but the doctors refused to allow it until he was more stable and coherent. Deputy Martinez stayed nearby, along with a detective named Sarah Reeves, who had taken over Marcus's cold case 3 years ago. "Mrs. Webb," Detective Reeves said, pulling Sarah aside while Emma sat with her father, "we need to understand what happened, where he's been, who might have kept him if this was a crime. But I want to be realistic with you. After 7 years, if this was a kidnapping or abduction, the chances of finding whoever was responsible are slim. Any physical evidence will be long gone." "I don't care about that right now," Sarah said, surprised by the edge in her own voice. "I just want him to be okay. I want my husband back." But even as she said it, Sarah knew it was not that simple. The man in that hospital bed was her husband, but he was also a stranger. 7 years had passed. Emma had grown from a child to a woman. Sarah herself had changed, had learned to live without him, had built a life around his absence. What would it mean to have him back now? Could they simply resume where they left off, as if no time had passed? And there was something else, something that made Sarah's skin prickle with unease. The way Marcus looked at everything around him, the way he flinched at sudden sounds, the way his eyes kept darting to the corners of the room as if expecting to see something there. He radiated fear, a deep and primal terror that seemed to go beyond simple trauma. When the nurses finished cleaning him and left the room, Sarah sat down in the chair beside his bed. Marcus's eyes were closed, but she could tell he was not asleep. His breathing was too rapid, too shallow. "Marcus," she said softly, "can you tell me what happened? Where were you?" His eyes opened, and for a moment they seemed to look not at Sarah, but through her, to something far away and terrible. "The well," he whispered, "but not just a well. Goes deeper, much deeper, down to places that shouldn't exist, places that were old when the mountains were young. It called me. That last night at camp, I heard it calling, pulled me out of my tent, led me through the forest. I thought it was a deer. I was following tracks, and then suddenly I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was falling, down and down and down, and then I was there, in the dark, in the deep." Sarah's throat tightened. "You were in a well for 7 years?" "Not just a well," Marcus repeated, his voice taking on a strange intensity. "It's a mouth, a throat, leading down to something vast and hungry. I could feel it breathing, Sarah, breathing around me, through me. And there were others, voices in the dark. They talked to me, taught me things, fed me things that kept me alive but changed me. I can't explain it. The words don't exist for what I saw, what I learned." He was rambling now, his words tumbling over each other, and Sarah realized Dr. Chen had been right. Whatever Marcus had endured had broken something in his mind. None of what he was saying made sense. He could not have survived 7 years at the bottom of a well. It was physiologically impossible. The exposure alone would have killed him within days. "It's okay," Sarah said, taking his hand despite the way he stiffened at her touch. "You don't have to explain right now. You're safe. You're going to get better, and we're going to figure all of this out." But Marcus shook his head violently, his eyes going wide. "You don't understand. I'm not safe. None of us are. It let me go, Sarah. It didn't have to, but it did. And it wouldn't have done that without a reason. It wants something. It sent me back for something." "What? What does it want?" Marcus's hand tightened around hers with surprising strength, and when he looked at her, his eyes held a lucidity that was somehow more frightening than his earlier confusion. "It wants to come up," he said, "all the way up, into the light. It's been patient, Sarah, so patient, waiting down there in the deep places, but it's tired of waiting now. The boundaries are thin, getting thinner, and I'm part of that. Whatever I became down there, I'm part of how it rises." Sarah pulled her hand away, disturbed by the fevered intensity in Marcus's voice. She stood up, backing toward the door. "I'm going to get Dr. Chen. You need to rest. Sarah, please, you have to listen, you have to believe me." But Sarah was already in the hallway, her heart pounding, looking for Dr. Chen or any of the medical staff. She found a nurse at the ICU station and told her that Marcus was becoming agitated, that he needed something to help him calm down. When she returned to the room, Emma was standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming down her face. Marcus had his eyes closed again, but Sarah could see he was not resting. His body was rigid with tension, and his lips moved constantly, forming words too quiet to hear. "Mom," Emma said, her voice small and frightened in a way Sarah had not heard since she was a child. "What happened to him?" Sarah wished she had an answer. She wished she could say something comforting, something that would make sense of the impossible situation they found themselves in, but she had nothing. "I don't know, baby, I really don't know." The nurse arrived with a sedative, and Marcus did not resist when she administered it through his IV. Within minutes, his body began to relax, the tension draining out of him, his breathing slowing to something more normal. His eyes opened one last time before the medication pulled him under, and they found Sarah's across the room. "It's already starting," he whispered. "Can't you feel it? The change, like a pressure in the air before a storm. It's coming, Sarah. It's coming up through me." Then his eyes closed and he was asleep, leaving Sarah and Emma alone with his words hanging in the air like a curse. That night, Sarah and Emma stayed at the hospital, refusing to leave despite the staff's assurances that Marcus was stable and that they should go home and rest. They took turns sitting with him, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the steady beep of the heart monitor, trying to reconcile this skeletal stranger with the man they had lost 7 years ago. Around midnight, while Sarah was sitting with Marcus and Emma had gone to get coffee from the vending machine, Marcus began to dream. His eyes moved rapidly beneath his closed lids, and he started to make sounds, low moans that escalated into words. "No, no, not yet. Need more time. It's not ready. I'm not ready. The vessel has to be willing, has to open. Can't force it. Not yet. Just a little longer." Sarah moved closer, unsure whether she should wake him or let the dream run its course. As she watched, something strange happened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, her breath suddenly visible in the air. The lights flickered, once, twice, and on the monitor beside the bed, Marcus's heart rate began to spike, climbing to dangerous levels. Sarah was about to call for a nurse when Marcus's eyes snapped open, but they were not the brown eyes she knew. They were black, completely black, as if the pupils had expanded to consume the iris and the white entirely. And when he spoke, it was not with his voice, but with something else, something that resonated with impossible depth. The sleeper wakes. The door opens. The ancient hunger rises. You cannot stop what has already begun. Then he screamed, a sound of such pure agony that it brought nurses running from the hallway. His back arched off the bed, straining against the restraints they had placed to keep him from pulling out his IV lines. The black faded from his eyes, brown bleeding back in like ink diluting in water, and he collapsed back onto the mattress, unconscious. The medical team swarmed around him, checking his vitals, adjusting medications, trying to determine what had caused the episode. Sarah stood pressed against the wall, shaking, unable to tear her eyes away from her husband's face. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and immediately began barking orders. They needed a neurological consult, a psychiatric evaluation, possibly a transfer to a facility better equipped to handle whatever was happening to Marcus Webb. Emma appeared beside Sarah, the coffee forgotten, her face white with shock. "Mum, his eyes. Did you see his eyes?" Sarah had seen them. She had seen them, and she knew with a certainty that went beyond logic or reason that Marcus had been telling the truth. Something had happened to him down in that well, something that could not be explained by conventional means, and whatever it was, it had not finished with him yet. As the medical team stabilized Marcus and the chaos in the room slowly subsided, Sarah found herself thinking about his words. It wants to come up, all the way up, into the light. She looked at her husband, sedated now and quiet, and wondered what they had truly brought back from the depths. Was this Marcus, or was it something wearing his face, something that had learned to mimic human speech and human emotion, but was fundamentally other? And if it was not Marcus, if her husband had died down in that well 7 years ago and something else had taken his place, what did that mean for her family? What had they welcomed into their lives? These questions circled in Sarah's mind as the night wore on and morning approached. She had waited 7 years for Marcus to come home. Now that he was here, she found herself wondering if some things were better left lost in the dark places of the world. But it was too late for such thoughts now. Marcus was back, for better or worse, and whatever came next, whatever had followed him up from the depths, they would have to face it together as a family. Even if that family was no longer quite human. Marcus spent 2 weeks in the hospital. During that time, teams of specialists examined him, ran tests, took samples, and tried to make sense of what should have been medically impossible. A human being could not survive 7 years at the bottom of a well without food, water, or shelter from the elements. And yet Marcus Webb had done exactly that, or so his story went. The physical evidence was baffling. While Marcus showed severe signs of malnutrition and dehydration consistent with recent deprivation, his body did not show the kind of damage that should have accumulated over 7 years. His muscles, though atrophied, were not as deteriorated as they should have been. His organs, while stressed, were functioning. Most puzzling were his teeth, which showed almost no decay despite what should have been years without proper hygiene. Dr. E. Patel, the neurologist brought in to evaluate Marcus, sat down with Sarah and Emma on the 4th day of his hospitalization. She was a small woman with intelligent eyes and a gentle manner that Sarah found comforting even as she delivered disturbing news. "Physically, your husband is recovering faster than we would have expected," Dr. Patel said, reviewing her notes. "But psychologically, we're seeing significant concerns. He displays symptoms consistent with severe trauma, including night terrors, dissociative episodes, and what appears to be a complex delusional system centered around his time in captivity." "Delusional," Sarah repeated, feeling the word like a weight. "So, you think he's making it up? The things he's been saying?" "Not making it up, no. I think he genuinely believes what he's telling us, but belief and reality are not always the same thing. The human mind is remarkably creative when it comes to processing trauma. It will construct narratives, create meaning where there might not be any, in order to make sense of experiences that are otherwise incomprehensible." Emma leaned forward in her chair. But where was he? If he wasn't in a well for 7 years, where was he? Someone had to have been keeping him somewhere. Dr. Patel's expression grew troubled. "That's the question, isn't it? The detective working the case has several theories. It's possible your father was held captive by someone, perhaps in a basement or bunker, and his memories of the location have been distorted by trauma and time. The well might be real, but it might not have been where he spent the majority of his missing years." "What about the marks on his skin?" Sarah asked, thinking of the strange geometric patterns that covered Marcus's torso and arms. "They look deliberate. We've documented those extensively. Some appear to be scarification, others might be burns. A psychologist on our team who specializes in cult behavior suggested they resemble ritual markings, but that's purely speculative. Without knowing who made them or under what circumstances, we can't draw any firm conclusions." The conversation left Sarah feeling more lost than before. Every answer seemed to generate 3 new questions, and the gap between what Marcus claimed had happened and what seemed physically possible only widened. Marcus himself remained inconsistent in his lucidity. There were hours when he seemed almost normal, able to hold conversations, recognize people, engage with his surroundings. He would ask about what he had missed, about Emma's college experience, about changes in the town, about world events. During these periods, it was almost possible to believe that he was simply recovering, that time and therapy would restore him to the man he had been. But then, the episodes would come. Without warning, Marcus would become agitated. His eyes would lose focus and he would begin speaking in that strange, resonant voice that did not quite sound like his own. He would talk about the deep places, about ancient things that slept beneath the mountains, about a hunger that had waited eons to be fed. The medical staff had taken to sedating him during these episodes, which seemed to be the only way to bring him back to himself. Detective Reeves visited regularly, trying to piece together what had happened. She brought photos of abandoned properties in the region, maps of cave systems, anything that might trigger a memory or provide a clue. But Marcus's responses were maddeningly vague. He could not tell them who had taken him or where he had been held. He insisted that he had been in the well the entire time, that there had been no human captor, only the thing that lived in the deep darkness. On the 10th day, Marcus was well enough to walk. A physical therapist worked with him, helping him rebuild strength in legs that had atrophied to near uselessness. Sarah watched through the observation window, as her husband took shaky steps with the aid of a walker, his face tight with concentration and pain. He had gained some weight back, no longer quite so skeletal, though he remained gaunt and hollow-eyed. Emma had returned to classes at Appalachian State, but came to the hospital every day after school. Sarah noticed that her daughter seemed torn between joy at having her father back and a deep unease that she could not quite articulate. More than once, Sarah caught Emma staring at Marcus with an expression that bordered on fear. "He's different, Mum," Emma said one evening as they sat in the hospital cafeteria, picking at salads neither of them wanted. "I know that's obvious, but I mean fundamentally different. The way he looks at things, the way he talks, even when he seems normal, there's something off about him." Sarah wanted to argue, to defend Marcus, but she could not. Emma was right. There was something fundamentally altered about the man in that hospital bed. It was not just the trauma or the physical changes, it was something deeper, something that made Sarah's instincts scream that this was not quite the man she had married. "The doctors say it's going to take time," Sarah said, not sure she believed it herself. 7 years is a long time. We can't expect him to just bounce back. That's not what I mean. Emma pushed her food around her plate, not eating. "Mum, do you remember what Dad was like before? Really remember? Because sometimes I try to, and it's like I'm looking at a photograph instead of a real memory, and the person in that room upstairs doesn't match the photograph." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from one of the ICU nurses. Marcus was asking for her. She stood, abandoning her uneaten salad, and Emma followed. They found Marcus sitting up in bed, looking more alert than he had in days. Dr. Chen was there along with Dr. Patel and Detective Reeves. Marcus's eyes found Sarah's as she entered, and something in his expression made her stop short. "I need to go home," Marcus said, his voice clear and firm. "I need to see the house. I need to be in familiar surroundings. Being here is making everything worse." Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, I understand the impulse, but you're not ready for discharge yet. We still have tests to run, and your psychiatric evaluation is incomplete. You can't keep me here against my will. I'm not a danger to myself or others. I'm just a man who wants to go home to his family." Marcus's gaze never left Sarah. "Please, I'm begging you. I need to be in my own space, sleep in my own bed. I feel like I'm suffocating in this building." Sarah looked at the medical team, uncertain. Dr. Patel shook her head slightly, a warning, but Dr. Chen looked resigned. "If you discharge yourself against medical advice, we can't stop you," Dr. Chen said, "but I want it on record that this is not recommended. You need ongoing care, Marcus, both physical and psychological. I'll come back for outpatient appointments. I'll see whatever specialists you want me to see, but I can't stay here another night, I can't." There was a desperation in Marcus's voice that Sarah had never heard before, and it frightened her. Against her better judgment, against the clear concern on the faces of the medical staff, Sarah heard herself say, "Okay, we'll take you home." The process of officially discharging Marcus took several hours. There were forms to sign, medications to be picked up from the pharmacy, appointments to be scheduled. Dr. Patel pulled Sarah aside one more time before they left. "I want you to have my direct number," the neurologist said, pressing a business card into Sarah's hand. "If anything happens, anything at all that concerns you, I want you to call me immediately, day or night. I'm going to be very direct with you, Mrs. Webb. I don't think your husband is ready to leave the hospital. I think there's something happening with him that we don't yet understand, and I'm worried about what might occur outside of a controlled medical environment." "Are you saying he's dangerous?" Sarah asked, the word tasting wrong in her mouth. "I'm saying I don't know, and not knowing makes me very uncomfortable. Please, just promise me you'll be careful. Watch him closely and don't hesitate to call for help if you need it," Sarah promised, tucking the card into her wallet, and tried to ignore the cold feeling settling in her stomach. It was late afternoon when they finally left the hospital, Marcus moving slowly with the aid of a cane the physical therapist had given him. He wore clothes that Sarah had brought from home, jeans and a flannel shirt that hung loose on his diminished frame. In the parking lot, he stopped and tilted his face toward the sky, breathing deeply as if tasting freedom for the first time. "I never thought I'd see sunlight again," he said softly. "Down there in the dark, I forgot what it looked like, what it felt like. I forgot a lot of things." They drove home in Sarah's car, Marcus in the passenger seat, Emma in the back. The late October afternoon was clear and cool, the mountains showing off their autumn colors in the slanting light. Marcus stared out the window like a child seeing the world for the first time, taking in every detail of the familiar landscape with an intensity that seemed almost painful. When they pulled into the driveway of the house on Laurel Creek Road, Marcus made a sound that might have been a sob. The house looked exactly as it had when he left 7 years ago. The same blue-gray siding, the same white trim, the same maple tree in the front yard, now dropping its red leaves onto the lawn. Getting Marcus inside and settled took effort. He was exhausted from the short trip, his body still weak despite the improvements of the past 2 weeks. Sarah helped him up the stairs to their bedroom, Emma trailing behind with his medications and the discharge papers. Marcus stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a long moment, just looking. Sarah had changed very little about the room during his absence. His side of the closet still held his clothes, though they smelled of cedar and disuse. His nightstand still had his reading lamp, his bookmark still in the thriller novel he had been reading the week he disappeared. "It's like time stopped," Marcus whispered, "like I was the only thing that moved forward." He lowered himself onto the bed with a groan of relief, his body sinking into the familiar mattress. Sarah sat beside him, and for a moment they were just 2 people in a bedroom, a husband and wife reunited after a long separation. It felt almost normal. "I need to sleep," Marcus said. "Real sleep, not the sedated kind. In my own bed. That's all I've wanted for so long." "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," Sarah said, standing. But Marcus caught her hand. "Stay, please. Just for a little while. I need to know this is real, that I'm really home." So Sarah lay down beside her husband for the first time in 7 years. She could feel the unfamiliar sharpness of his bones through his clothes, smell the antiseptic hospital scent that still clung to his skin beneath the cologne she had brought him. His breathing gradually slowed, and she thought he had fallen asleep. Then he spoke, his voice drowsy and strange. "It's louder here. I thought it would be quieter, farther from the well, but it's louder, like it's closer to the surface. Can you hear it, Sarah? That low hum, just at the edge of hearing, like the mountain is breathing." Sarah listened, but heard nothing except the normal sounds of the house, the creak of old wood settling, the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. "I don't hear anything. You're just tired. Rest now." "Maybe," Marcus murmured. "Or maybe you will, soon, when it gets closer. When the boundaries dissolve completely, you'll hear it then. Everyone will." He drifted off, and Sarah lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she had brought into her home. After a while, she carefully extricated herself and went downstairs, where Emma was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, but not working, just staring at the screen. "Is he asleep?" Emma asked. "Yes, finally." Sarah moved to the kitchen sink and looked out the window at the backyard, where autumn leaves drifted across the grass. Everything looked so normal, so mundane. It was hard to believe that anything was wrong. The first night was quiet. Marcus slept through until morning, and when Sarah woke beside him, he seemed more rested than she had seen him since his return. They had a simple breakfast together, the 3 of them at the kitchen table, and if Sarah tried hard enough, she could almost pretend it was like old times. But then Marcus started walking through the house, touching things, opening doors, looking into rooms with an intensity that felt wrong. Sarah followed at a distance, watching as he ran his fingers along walls, pressed his ear against doors, stood for long minutes in doorways as if listening to something only he could hear. "What are you doing?" Sarah finally asked. Marcus turned to her, and his eyes were fever-bright. "Making sure, checking the boundaries. The house is a threshold, Sarah, like the well was a threshold. There are thin places in the world, places where the deep things can push through if the conditions are right. I need to know if this is one of them." "Marcus, you're not making sense." "I'm making perfect sense. You just don't understand yet, but you will. It's already starting to affect you. I can see it. The way you keep looking over your shoulder, the way you jump at shadows. Part of you knows, your instincts are trying to warn you." Sarah wanted to argue, but she could not. She had been feeling uneasy since bringing Marcus home, a persistent sense that something was not right, that they were being watched from just beyond the edge of perception. The second night was worse. Sarah woke around 3 in the morning to find Marcus's side of the bed empty. She found him in the basement, standing in the dark, staring at the concrete wall. "Marcus, what are you doing down here?" He did not turn around. "Listening. It's strongest here. The basement is closest to the earth, closest to the deep places. I can almost hear it clearly, the heartbeat, the old hunger. It knows I'm here. It's glad I came home." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Come back to bed, please." Marcus finally turned, and in the dim light filtering down from upstairs, his eyes looked strange, reflecting light in a way that human eyes should not. Do you know what it's like, Sarah? To be connected to something vast and ancient, to feel its presence in your mind, whispering, always whispering, I'm not alone anymore, I'll never be alone again, even when I want to be. He walked past her and up the stairs, leaving Sarah standing in the dark basement, her heart racing. She waited until she heard him moving around in the bedroom above before she followed. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Marcus would seem relatively normal during the day, tired and withdrawn, but functional. He sat with Emma and asked about her classes, her friends, her life over the past 7 years. He watched television with Sarah in the evenings, helped fold laundry, performed small domestic tasks that should have been comforting in their normalcy. But at night, he changed. He would wake and wander the house, speaking to things that were not there, pressing his hands against walls and floors as if feeling for vibrations. Twice, Sarah found him in Emma's room, standing over her while she slept, and the look on his face in those moments was so alien that Sarah had to physically lead him away. Emma started locking her bedroom door at night. On the 5th day after coming home, Marcus asked to go back to the well. Sarah refused immediately, and when Marcus persisted, she called Dr. Patel. The neurologist came to the house that evening, sitting with Marcus in the living room, while Sarah and Emma listened from the kitchen. I need to understand what happened to you, Dr. Patel said gently, but I need you to help me separate reality from trauma response. Can you do that? You think I'm crazy, Marcus said flatly. You all do. I can see it in the way you look at me, but I'm not. I'm more sane than I've ever been. The things I learned down there, they opened my eyes. There's a whole reality you don't see, Doctor. A reality that exists alongside yours, overlapping with it in places. And in those places, the boundaries are thin. Tell me about the well, describe it for me. It's not deep in the conventional sense, 20 feet, maybe 30, but that's just the beginning. There are passages at the bottom, tunnels that lead down into the mountain. The original builders must have broken through into something that was already there, something old. The tunnels go down, and the deeper you go, the more the rules change. Time doesn't work the same way. Space folds in on itself. I would walk for what felt like hours and end up back where I started, or I would close my eyes for what felt like a moment and open them to find days had passed. Did you see anyone else down there? Any other people? Marcus's expression grew distant. Not people, not exactly, but there were others. Voices in the dark, things that had been there so long they'd become part of the stone. They taught me, fed me, kept me alive for a purpose. What purpose? Marcus's eyes focused on Dr. Patel with unsettling intensity. To be a witness, to carry the knowledge back to the surface, to prepare the way for what's coming. Dr. Patel made notes, her expression carefully neutral. After she left, Sarah walked her to her car. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. He needs to be hospitalized again, Dr. Patel said. Voluntarily if possible, involuntarily if necessary. Mrs. Webb, I'm going to be blunt with you. Your husband is experiencing a complete break from reality. His delusions are becoming more elaborate and more firmly entrenched. Without intervention, I'm afraid he might hurt himself or someone else. He hasn't been violent, Sarah protested, though even as she said it, she remembered the way Marcus had stood over Emma while she slept, the strange expression on his face. Not yet, but I've seen cases like this before. The line between delusion and action can be very thin. Dr. Patel pulled out a prescription pad and wrote something down. This is a stronger antipsychotic medication. If you can get him to take it, it might help. But Sarah, please consider having him committed for a proper evaluation. I don't think you and Emma are safe with him in the house. After Dr. Patel left, Sarah stood in the driveway for a long time, watching the last light fade from the sky. The mountains loomed around their small town, dark and ancient and indifferent. Somewhere out there was the well that had held her husband for 7 years, or so he claimed. Part of her wanted to go there, to see it for herself, to try to understand what had really happened. But a larger part of her was afraid of what she might find. That night, Sarah lay awake, listening to Marcus breathe beside her. His sleep was restless, punctuated by soft murmurs and occasional movements. Around midnight he began to speak, his voice clear despite being asleep. The old roads, the ways beneath, they're opening. Can't be stopped now. Too much weight, too much time. The seal is cracking. Soon, very soon. When the veil is thinnest, when the door swings wide. Sarah reached over to wake him, but before she could touch his shoulder, his eyes opened. They were black again, completely black, and when he smiled, it was not with Marcus's smile, but with something that had learned to imitate human expression. "Hello, Sarah," it said with Marcus's mouth. "Don't worry. This will all be over soon. The waiting, the uncertainty, the fear. When we rise, there will be no more questions, only the eternal dark and the hunger and the sweet dissolution of all you think you are." Then Marcus blinked, and his eyes were brown again, and he was staring at Sarah with confusion and fear. "Sarah, why are you looking at me like that? What happened?" Sarah got out of bed without answering, went into the bathroom and locked the door. She sat on the edge of the tub with her head in her hands, trying to control her breathing, trying not to scream. She had to call someone, the police, the hospital, someone who could help. This was beyond her ability to handle. Marcus was not getting better. He was getting worse, and whatever was inside him, whatever had come back with him from the well, was growing stronger. But when she thought about calling, about having Marcus taken away again, about Emma losing her father a second time, she could not do it. Not yet, not without trying everything else first. So she went back to bed, lay down beside her husband, and prayed for the strength to face whatever was coming, because something was coming. Marcus had been right about that much. She could feel it now, a pressure in the air, a sense of time running out, of something vast and terrible stirring in the deep places beneath the mountain, and her husband, the man she loved, was the key that would open the door. The changes started small. On the 7th day after Marcus came home, Sarah noticed that the plants in the house were dying, not slowly withering, but dying rapidly, their leaves turning brown and brittle overnight, as if something was draining the life from them. She threw them away without mentioning it to Marcus or Emma, but the next morning, the grass in the backyard had begun to yellow in a perfect circle around the spot where Marcus had stood the previous evening, just standing and staring at the ground. Emma started having nightmares. She would wake screaming about being trapped underground, about voices calling her name from the dark, about hands reaching up from beneath the earth to pull her down. Sarah would hold her daughter while she cried, feeling helpless and afraid, because she was having similar dreams. The house itself seemed to be changing. Doors that had never stuck before now required force to open. The temperature fluctuated wildly, some rooms freezing while others remained warm. Electronics behaved strangely, turning on by themselves, displaying static, or dying completely. Sarah's phone would show messages she had never received, text strings that looked like gibberish, or perhaps some ancient language she did not recognize. Marcus's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would spend hours in the basement, and when Sarah went to check on him, she would find him sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, his eyes closed, his lips moving in a silent chant. The markings on his skin seemed more prominent than before, as if they were somehow rising to the surface, becoming more defined. On the 10th day, Sarah woke to find Marcus gone from their bed. It was 4 in the morning, still dark outside. She found him in Emma's room again, but this time Emma was awake, pressed back against her headboard, her eyes wide with terror. "Get out," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Dad, please just get out of my room." Marcus stood at the foot of her bed, swaying slightly, his eyes unfocused. "I need to explain something to you, Emma. Something important. The transformation is coming, and when it does, you need to be ready. You need to understand that what you think of as reality is just a thin membrane stretched over something much larger and darker and more true." "Sarah!" Emma called out, seeing her mother in the doorway. Sarah moved into the room and took Marcus's arm. He was ice cold to the touch, his skin clammy. "Marcus, come with me. Emma needs to sleep." Marcus allowed himself to be led away, but as they left, he looked back at Emma with an expression of such profound sadness that Sarah felt her heart break. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry for what I'm going to do, what I have to do, but it's already in motion. I couldn't stop it, even if I wanted to." Back in their bedroom, Sarah made Marcus sit on the bed. She knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers. They were so cold, like touching ice. "Marcus, listen to me. You need help. Real help. More than I can give you. We need to take you back to the hospital." Marcus shook his head, and tears began streaming down his face. "It won't matter, don't you see? The hospital can't help me. Nothing can. I'm changing, Sarah. Every day I'm a little less human and a little more something else. It's in my cells now, in my blood, in my bones. Whatever I became down there, it's permanent, and it's contagious." "What do you mean contagious?" "The house, the land, you and Emma, it's spreading, like ripples in water. I'm the stone that was dropped, and the ripples are expanding outward. Soon they'll reach the whole town, then beyond. It's what I was meant to do, what I was made to do. Sarah stood up, backing away from him. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. I'm terrified, but being scared won't stop what's coming. Marcus lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Do you remember what I was like before? Really remember? Sometimes I try to recall it, and it's like looking at a stranger. That Marcus Webb is gone. He died in the well, in the dark, in the deep places where light has never reached. What came back is just wearing his face. Sarah left the room, unable to listen to any more. She found Emma in the kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky outside pale gray. "Mom, we can't keep doing this," Emma said without preamble. "He's getting worse. He's scaring me. I don't feel safe in this house anymore. I know. I'm going to call Dr. Patel this morning. We're going to get him help." But when Sarah called, Dr. Patel's news was not encouraging. Without Marcus's consent, the only way to commit him is if he's an immediate danger to himself or others. Has he threatened anyone? Has he attempted violence? No, but he's behaving very strangely. He came into my daughter's room in the middle of the night. He says disturbing things. He claims he's changing into something not human. I understand your concern, but legally that's not enough. Unless he actually does something, our hands are tied. I can come by later today if you'd like. Maybe I can convince him to admit himself voluntarily. After the call, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. She felt trapped, caught between her love for Marcus and her responsibility to protect Emma. And beneath it all, a growing fear that Marcus might actually be right, that something impossible and terrible was happening, and that she was powerless to stop it. That afternoon, while Marcus was sleeping, Sarah made a decision. She needed to see the well. She needed to understand where Marcus had been, what had happened to him. Maybe then she could figure out how to help him. She told Emma she was running errands and drove out of town, following the directions Detective Reeves had given her weeks ago. The well was on an old property in Meat Camp, a name that had always struck Sarah as vaguely ominous. The drive took 40 minutes, the road getting progressively narrower and more rutted as she left civilization behind. The property was marked with crime scene tape, though no one was there to enforce the perimeter. Sarah ducked under the tape and walked up the overgrown path toward the remnants of what had once been a homestead. The house was long gone, collapsed into rubble, but the well remained, a circle of stacked stones about 4 feet high, covered now with a sheet of plywood weighted down with rocks. Sarah approached slowly, feeling her heart rate accelerate. This was where they had found Marcus. This was where he claimed to have spent 7 years. She moved the rocks and pushed the plywood aside, then peered over the edge of the well. The shaft went down about 30 feet, ending in a floor of packed earth and stone. Daylight illuminated it clearly. There was nothing supernatural about it, nothing obviously strange. Just an old well, dry and abandoned, the kind that dotted abandoned properties throughout the mountains. But as Sarah stared into it, she felt something. A pull, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness, a sense that the well was deeper than it appeared, that what she was seeing was just the surface of something that went down much farther. The temperature around her seemed to drop, and for just a moment she thought she heard voices rising from the depths, speaking in a language she almost understood. Then a hand grabbed her shoulder, and Sarah screamed. She whirled around to find Detective Reeves standing behind her, looking concerned. "Mrs. Webb, what are you doing out here?" Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely speak. "I needed to see it, where you found him." Detective Reeves looked at the well, her expression troubled. "You shouldn't be here. This is still an active investigation site." "Investigation into what? You found my husband. Case closed, right?" "Not quite. We're trying to determine if a crime was committed. If someone held your husband against his will, they need to be prosecuted." Detective Reeves paused, choosing her words carefully. "Mrs. Webb, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never encountered anything like your husband's case. His story doesn't make sense. The physical evidence doesn't support 7 years of captivity in a well, but he clearly experienced something traumatic. I'm just not sure we'll ever know what really happened. He keeps talking about things down there, passages and tunnels, other beings. Do you think there could be cave systems under the well? Places he could have actually survived?" Detective Reeves walked to the well and looked down. "We had a team from the State Geological Survey check it out. There are no caves, no tunnels, nothing but solid rock. Whatever your husband experienced, it wasn't in any physical space connected to this well." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. "So, you think he's lying? Or delusional?" I think he believes what he's saying. I think something terrible happened to him, and his mind is trying to process it in the only way it can. But the literal truth of his story? Detective Reeves shook her head. I don't think we'll ever know that. Sarah thanked the detective and drove home, feeling more confused and frightened than before. If Marcus had not been in the well, where had he been? And if his memories of tunnels and deep places were delusions, why did Sarah herself feel that pull, hear those whispers, sense that presence in the dark? When she got home, she found Emma sitting on the porch steps, her face pale and drawn. Where's your father? Sarah asked. Basement. He's been down there for hours. Mom, I heard him talking to something, having a full conversation, but there's no one else down there. I checked. Sarah went inside and opened the basement door. She could hear Marcus's voice floating up from below, and Emma was right. He was having a conversation, his tone alternating between questioning and listening, as if someone else was responding. I understand, Marcus was saying. The timing has to be perfect. All Hallows Eve, when the veil is thinnest, when the old ways still have power. 3 more days. I can feel it building. The pressure, the anticipation. Sarah descended the stairs slowly. Marcus was in the far corner of the basement, facing the wall, his palms pressed flat against the concrete. When he heard her footsteps, he turned, and his face was radiant with a terrible joy. Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. I need to show you something. Come here, put your hands on the wall. Marcus, who were you talking to? Them, the ones below. They're so close now. Sarah, you can feel them if you try. The vibration, the presence, the ancient hunger rising toward the light. Sarah did not want to touch the wall, but Marcus took her hand and pressed it against the concrete. At first, she felt nothing but cold stone. Then, gradually, she began to perceive something else. A vibration, so low it was almost below the threshold of perception. A rhythm that might have been a heartbeat, slow and vast and patient. She jerked her hand away, stumbling backward. What is that? The truth, Marcus said simply. The reality beneath the reality you've always known. It's been here all along, Sarah. Under the mountains, under the town, under every place humans have ever built their fragile structures and pretended they were safe. And now, it's waking up. Sarah ran up the stairs, her mind reeling. She grabbed Emma and her car keys. We're leaving, right now. Pack a bag. What? Why? Because your father is right. Something is wrong with this house, maybe with this whole town. We need to get away at least for a few days. But as they were throwing clothes into overnight bags, Marcus appeared in the doorway of Emma's room. He looked lucid, more like himself than he had in days. You can't leave, he said quietly. It won't make any difference. The distance between here and anywhere else you might go is meaningless now. The boundaries are breaking down. By the time you reach the next town, you'd carry it with you. You'd be the stone dropped in their pond, starting new ripples. Better to stay here where it began. At least here you'll understand what's happening when the end comes. There is no end coming, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. There's just a sick man who needs help. Marcus, please, let us take you back to the hospital. Marcus's expression softened with genuine sadness. I love you, Sarah. I love Emma. That's the worst part of all of this. The part of me that's still Marcus Webb remembers loving you, and it's breaking his heart to know what he's become, what he's done by coming back. But it's too late now. The ritual is in motion. 3 more days, and then you'll see. Everyone will see. He turned and walked away, leaving Sarah and Emma staring at each other in horror. That night, Sarah locked herself and Emma in Emma's room, pushing the dresser in front of the door. They huddled together on the bed, neither of them sleeping, listening to Marcus move through the house. He was chanting something, the words unclear, but the rhythm hypnotic and disturbing. Around midnight, all the electronics in the house turned on simultaneously, every television, every radio, every device creating a cacophony of noise and light. Then, just as suddenly, everything went dark and silent. In that silence, Sarah heard something else. The low hum she had felt in the basement wall, but louder now, clearer. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, a vibration that seemed to resonate in her bones. And beneath it, voices. Hundreds of voices, thousands, all whispering the same thing in that language she almost understood. Soon, soon, soon. Emma gripped Sarah's hand. Mom, I'm scared. I know, baby. Me too. The night stretched on forever. When dawn finally came, grey and cold, Sarah and Emma emerged from their barricaded room to find Marcus asleep on the living room couch, looking small and fragile and utterly human. For a moment, Sarah could almost believe that everything that had happened was a nightmare, a shared delusion brought on by the stress of Marcus's return. Then she looked out the front window and saw that all the grass in the yard was dead. Not just yellow, but completely dead, brown and brittle, as if something had sucked all the life from it overnight. The maple tree had lost all its leaves, which lay in a red carpet around its base, and in the center of the dead grass was a pattern, scorched into the earth like a crop circle, the same geometric design that covered Marcus's skin. Sarah's phone rang, startling her. It was Dr. Patel. "Mrs. Webb, I'm calling to tell you that you need to get out of that house immediately. I've been researching your husband's case, talking to colleagues, looking into similar incidents. I found something that disturbs me greatly. There have been 7 other disappearances in that area over the past century. People who vanished into the mountains and were either never found or found years later changed. And every single one of them was found near that well or in the surrounding area. Mrs. Webb, I think that well is dangerous. I think there's something about that location that affects people in ways we don't understand." "It's too late," Sarah said numbly, watching Marcus sleep on the couch. "It's already happening. Whatever it is, it's already here." "What do you mean?" "Come see for yourself. Bring the police, bring anyone you think might be able to help, because I don't think my husband is the only one who's changed. I think it's happening to all of us now." After hanging up, Sarah went to the couch and knelt beside Marcus. In sleep he looked peaceful, almost like the man she had married. She reached out and touched his face, and his eyes opened. They were brown again, clear and aware, and filled with such profound sorrow that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm so sorry," Marcus whispered. "I tried to fight it. I tried to stay away. But it called me back. It needed me back. And now it's too late for any of us." "Marcus, what's going to happen? On Halloween, what's supposed to happen?" Marcus took her hand and held it against his chest. His heart was beating, but the rhythm was wrong, too slow, as if counting down to something. The convergence, the alignment. When the veil between worlds is thinnest, when the old powers still have sway, the door will open fully. Not just here, but everywhere the ripples have reached. And what's been waiting beneath will rise. Not all at once. Slowly, gradually, but inevitably. The world you know is ending, Sarah, and I'm the one who opened the door. Before Sarah could respond, she heard cars pulling up outside. Dr. Patel had arrived, and she had brought Detective Reeves and 2 sheriff's deputies. They came into the house and stopped short when they saw the state of Marcus, the dead plants, the strange atmosphere that hung over everything. "Mr. Webb," Dr. Patel said carefully, "I think you need to come with us, for evaluation. We need to understand what's happening." Marcus stood up slowly, making no attempt to resist. "It won't matter where I am. The ritual is set. The time is fixed. But if it makes you feel better, I'll come with you." As the deputies led Marcus out to their car, he looked back at Sarah one more time. "I love you, remember that. Whatever happens, whatever I become, Marcus Webb loved you with all his heart, and that love is the only thing that might save you when the darkness comes." Then he was gone, and Sarah was left standing in her dead yard, watching the police car disappear down Laurel Creek Road, carrying her husband away for the second and final time. Emma came out of the house and stood beside her mother. Together, they stared at the symbol burned into their lawn, at the dead tree, at the grey sky pressing down like a weight. "What do we do now?" Emma asked. Sarah did not have an answer, because she could feel it now, that pull toward the well, toward the deep places, toward whatever was rising from beneath the mountain. She could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in the very cells of her body. Marcus had been right. It was contagious, and they had all been infected the moment he came home. 2 days until Halloween. 2 days until the convergence. 2 days until they would all learn what ancient thing had been sleeping beneath the Appalachian mountains, and what it would do now that it had finally found a way to rise. October 31st, 2023. Halloween. All Hallows' Eve. The day when the veil between worlds grows thin. Sarah woke before dawn to find that she had been sleepwalking again. She was standing in the backyard, barefoot in the dead grass, staring at the symbol burned into the earth. Her feet were muddy and cold, and she had no memory of coming outside. Emma found her there, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and guided her back into the house. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" Emma said, her voice hollow with exhaustion and fear. Neither of them had slept properly since Marcus had been taken to the hospital 2 days ago. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. The dreams were constant now, vivid and terrible. Dreams of falling through darkness, of voices calling her name, of vast spaces opening beneath her feet. And when she was awake, the world felt wrong, as if reality itself was becoming unstable. Shadows moved independently of their sources. Sounds echoed when they should not. Time seemed to skip and stutter, minutes passing like hours, hours vanishing in what felt like seconds. The whole town felt it. Sarah saw it in the faces of people at the grocery store, in the emergency department, where she had tried and failed to work her shift the previous day. Everyone looked exhausted, haunted, as if they were all having the same nightmares. There had been a rash of car accidents, people falling asleep at the wheel or swerving to avoid things that were not there. The hospital was overwhelmed with patients complaining of hallucinations, insomnia, inexplicable feelings of dread. And Marcus had been right about the spread. The dead vegetation was not limited to their yard anymore. Throughout Boone and the surrounding areas, grass was dying, trees were losing their leaves out of season, gardens were withering overnight. The pattern was expanding outward from the Webb house in a perfect circle, growing wider each day. Dr. Patel called every few hours with updates on Marcus. He was being held in the psychiatric ward at Mission Hospital in Asheville, nearly an hour away. The doctors there were baffled by his condition. His physical health continued to deteriorate, despite all interventions. He was losing weight again, his body temperature remained dangerously low, and the markings on his skin were growing more pronounced, rising from the surface as if they were being carved from the inside out. But the most disturbing development was that he was no longer the only one. 3 other patients had been admitted with similar symptoms, all of them residents of Boone, all of them complaining of the same things Marcus had described. Voices in the dark, a presence beneath the earth, a feeling of being connected to something vast and ancient and hungry. Detective Reeves had contacted the FBI, suggesting that some kind of environmental contamination might be affecting the town. Teams were being sent to test the water, the soil, the air, but Sarah knew they would find nothing. This was not chemical, it was not biological, it was something that did not fit into the categories of normal investigation. As the sun rose on Halloween morning, Sarah made a decision. She was going back to the well. If that was where this had all started, maybe that was where she could find answers. Maybe there was still a way to stop what was coming, though she had no idea what that might be. Emma insisted on coming with her. Sarah tried to argue, to tell her daughter to stay home where it was safe, but Emma cut her off. "Nowhere is safe anymore, Mom. You know that. Whatever is happening, it's happening to both of us. We face it together." They drove out to meat camp in the early morning light, the mountains around them looking strange and ominous under the grey October sky. The woods were too quiet, Sarah realized. No birds singing, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just silence, as if every living thing had fled the area. The well was no longer covered. The plywood sheet lay beside it, and the crime scene tape had been torn down. Someone else had been here recently. Sarah could see fresh footprints in the muddy ground around the well's perimeter. She and Emma approached slowly, and Sarah felt that pull again, stronger than before. It was not just a whisper at the edge of her consciousness now. It was a roar, a command, a gravitational force drawing her toward the stone circle. She had to fight to keep from running to it, from climbing over the edge and letting herself fall into the darkness below. "Mom, look," Emma said, pointing. Around the well in the dirt and mud, someone had drawn symbols, the same geometric patterns that covered Marcus's skin, that had been burned into their lawn. And they were glowing, faintly, with a sickly green-blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Sarah's heartbeat. "We need to leave," Sarah said, but her feet would not move. She was rooted to the spot, staring at the well, feeling something rising from its depths. Not physically rising, but pushing up through layers of reality, thinning the barrier between what was and what should not be. Then she heard footsteps behind them, and turned to find Marcus standing at the edge of the clearing. He looked terrible. He was dressed in a hospital gown, his feet bare and bleeding from walking through the forest. But worse than his physical appearance was the expression on his face, a mixture of Marcus's features and something else entirely, something that looked at Sarah through her husband's eyes with an intelligence that was not human. "Who came?" he said, and his voice was layered, multiple tones speaking in harmony. "I hoped you would. I tried to stay away, tried to keep you safe, but the pull was too strong for all of us." "Marcus, how did you get here? The hospital is an hour away." "I walked, or rather we walked. Time and distance don't mean what they used to, not anymore, not as the convergence approaches." Marcus moved closer, and Sarah saw that the markings on his skin were glowing now, the same sickly light as the symbols around the well. It's almost time, Sarah. Can you feel it? The world holding its breath, waiting for the door to open. I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand any of this. Marcus smiled, but it was not his smile. No human mind can fully comprehend what dwells in the deep places, but I'll try to explain, because I think you deserve to know. Because Marcus Webb loved you, and some part of him still exists within this vessel, screaming to warn you. He gestured to the well. This is not just a well. It's a thin place, a spot where the boundaries between realities are naturally weak. The people who built it centuries ago, they knew. They were trying to seal something, not dig into it. They lined it with stone, blessed by priests, marked it with protective symbols, covered it, and tried to hide it. But the seal was imperfect. And over time it weakened. Seal against what? Against the Hollow King, the thing that dwells beneath the mountains. It's old, Sarah. Older than humanity. Older than the mountains themselves. It was here when the first microbes crawled from the primordial seas, and it will be here long after the last star burns out. It exists in a space that overlaps with your world, but is not part of it. A dimension of eternal darkness and hunger. Emma had grabbed Sarah's hand, squeezing tight. "Oh, you're saying there's a monster under the mountain? That's insane. Not a monster, a god. A being of such vast power and alien consciousness that calling it a monster is like calling the ocean wet. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't even notice you, not individually. You're just food, energy to be consumed, and it's been feeding on small things for eons, pulling them down through the cracks, sustaining itself on scraps. But it wants more. It wants to rise fully into this world, to feast on all the light and life and consciousness it can find." Marcus moved to the edge of the well and looked down into the darkness. 7 years ago, it called to me. It needed a conduit, someone who could bridge the gap between its realm and yours, someone who could be transformed, hollowed out and filled with its presence. I fought it for so long, Sarah. Down in the deep places, I fought to stay myself, to hold on to my humanity. But piece by piece it replaced me, my cells, my thoughts, my very essence, until I was more it than me. Then why did it let you go? Why send you back up? Because the transformation was complete, and because I'm the final piece of the ritual. On this night, when the veil is thinnest, a willing vessel standing at the threshold between worlds can open the door fully. The Hollow King can pour through me, using me as a bridge to manifest in your reality. Sarah felt ice in her veins. A willing vessel. You're saying you're going to help this thing after everything it's done to you, to us. For just a moment, Marcus's face contorted with anguish, and Sarah saw her husband there, the real Marcus, trapped inside and screaming. I don't want to. God, Sarah, you have to believe that. Marcus Webb does not want to do this. But the thing inside him is in control now, and it will use his body, his voice, his face, to do what needs to be done. Marcus turned away from the well and faced them fully, and tears were streaming down his face, even as his expression remained cold and alien. The ritual begins at sunset, when the last light fades and the boundary is weakest. I will stand at the threshold, I will speak the words of opening, and the Hollow King will rise, and when it does, this entire region will be consumed. Boone, Blowing Rock, Banner Elk, all the small towns nestled in these mountains, thousands of people. Their consciousness will be drawn down into the dark, feeding the Hollow King, making it stronger, allowing it to spread further. No, Sarah said, the word coming out as a sob. No, I won't let you do this. There has to be a way to stop it. There is only one way, Marcus said quietly. The vessel must be destroyed before the ritual is complete, before sunset. If I die, the bridge cannot form. The Hollow King will remain in its realm, unable to cross over. But, Sarah, you have to understand what I'm asking. You have to kill me. You have to kill your husband. The words hung in the air between them. Emma made a sound of horror, and Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. I can't do that, she whispered. You must. It's the only way to save Emma, to save everyone. Marcus Webb is already dead, Sarah. What you see before you is just a puppet, animated by something that should not exist. If you have any love left for the man I was, please, end this before it's too late. Sarah shook her head, backing away. There has to be another way. We can get you back to the hospital, restrain you, keep you away from the well until midnight passes. The veil will thicken again. The ritual will fail. But even as she said it, she knew it was futile. Marcus was not the only vessel. There were others in the hospital with the same symptoms, the same markings, the same connection to the Hollow King. If not Marcus, one of them would complete the ritual, and if they were all stopped, the entity would find another way. It had waited eons. It could be patient a little longer. Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. "You're right. Stopping me alone won't be enough, but I'm the strongest vessel, the one who has been transformed the longest. If I'm destroyed, it will set the Hollow King back significantly. Give your world time to prepare, to understand what it's facing. Maybe even time to find a more permanent solution." Before Sarah could respond, she heard the sound of vehicles approaching, multiple cars driving fast on the rutted Forest Service road. Within moments, Detective Reeves emerged from the tree line, along with Dr. Patel, several sheriff's deputies, and a team of people Sarah did not recognize, all wearing suits and carrying equipment. "Marcus Webb," Detective Reeves called out, her hand on her holstered weapon. "You need to come with us. You're in violation of your psychiatric hold, and you're considered a danger to yourself and others." Marcus laughed, a sound that held no humor. "You have no idea how dangerous I am. None of you do, but you're about to find out." He turned back to the well and began to chant, words in that language Sarah almost understood, words that made the air shimmer and the ground tremble. The symbols around the well blazed brighter, and the sky above them darkened despite it being mid-morning. Clouds were gathering with impossible speed, roiling and black, blocking out the sun. "Stop him!" Dr. Patel shouted, and the deputies moved forward, but before they could reach Marcus, the earth shook. A real earthquake, strong enough to knock several people off their feet. Cracks appeared in the ground, radiating out from the well like the spokes of a wheel, and from those cracks came a sound, a low moan that seemed to rise from the very center of the earth. Sarah grabbed Emma and pulled her away from the expanding cracks. Around them, people were shouting, running, trying to understand what was happening. The suited individuals were deploying strange equipment, meters and sensors that immediately went haywire, needles slamming to the maximum and beyond. Marcus stood at the well's edge, his arms raised, his voice growing louder. The markings on his skin were blazing like fire now, and the light was spreading, traveling across the ground in tendrils, connecting to the symbols drawn in the dirt, creating a vast pattern that encompassed the entire clearing. And then Sarah understood. The symbols were not just around the well, they were everywhere, miles of them carved into trees, scratched into stones, drawn in the dirt, all through these mountains. Marcus had not been the only one preparing. There were others, other vessels, other servants of the Hollow King, all working in concert to create a massive ritual circle that covered the entire region. "We're too late," Dr. Patel said, staring at the equipment readings. "Whatever is happening, it's already in motion. The readings I'm getting, they don't make sense. It's like reality itself is coming apart." The ground shook again, harder this time. The well began to crumble, stones falling inward, the shaft widening. But it was not just expanding physically. It was opening in other ways, dimensions folding back to reveal depths that should not exist. Sarah could see down into it now, past the 30 feet of stone and earth, down into impossible distances, into darkness that seemed to have weight and substance. And in that darkness something stirred. It was too vast to comprehend, too alien to describe. Sarah's mind tried to make sense of what she was seeing and failed, could only register impressions. Hunger, ancient beyond measure, patient, implacable, aware, and rising now, surging upward through the opened way, using Marcus as its anchor point in this world. Marcus screamed, his body convulsing as something forced its way through him. The scream went on, human vocal cords pushed beyond their limits, blood running from his mouth and nose and ears. But still he stood, still he chanted, his will subsumed by the thing that wore his flesh. Sarah knew what she had to do. Marcus had been right. He had to be stopped, no matter the cost. She looked around desperately for something, anything that could be used as a weapon. One of the deputies had dropped his firearm when the earthquake hit. Sarah ran for it, her hands closing around the cold metal. She had never fired a gun before. She was a nurse, someone who saved lives, not took them. But as she raised the weapon with shaking hands and pointed it at her husband, she knew this was not murder. It was mercy. Marcus Webb was already dead. She was just freeing him from the thing that had enslaved him. "Mom, no!" Emma screamed, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Sarah pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed across the clearing, and Marcus staggered backward. The chanting stopped. For a moment everything seemed to freeze, the world holding its breath. Then Marcus looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, looked up at Sarah with eyes that were suddenly completely human, and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. "I love you, Sarah. Tell Emma I love her. And run. Run as fast as you can." He fell backward into the well, his body disappearing into the darkness below. And in the moment of his death, the ritual shattered. The light from the symbols flickered and died. The darkness that had been rising from the depths recoiled as if wounded. The shaking ground stilled, but the victory was incomplete. Sarah could feel it. The Hollow King had been forced back, but not sealed away. The door had been opened, just a crack, and though it had closed again with Marcus's death, it would never be fully shut. The barrier between worlds had been weakened, and things could pass through now that never could before. The sky began to clear, normal daylight returning. The people in the clearing slowly got to their feet, looking around in confusion and shock. Detective Reeves was on her radio, calling for backup, for ambulances, for someone to make sense of what had just happened. Dr. Patel approached Sarah slowly, carefully, as if approaching a dangerous animal. "Mrs. Webb, Sarah, you need to give me the gun." Sarah looked down at the weapon in her hands, as if seeing it for the first time. She had killed her husband. She had pulled the trigger and ended his life. The reality of it hit her like a physical blow, and she collapsed to her knees, the gun falling from her nerveless fingers. Emma was there immediately, wrapping her arms around her mother, both of them sobbing. They had lost Marcus twice now, once to the darkness 7 years ago, and again today by Sarah's own hand. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to drown them both. But beneath the grief, Sarah felt something else. Relief. Because Emma was alive. The town was still standing. The people she loved were safe, at least for now. Marcus's sacrifice had not been in vain. In the days that followed, Sarah and Emma learned to live with what had happened. The official story was that Marcus Webb, suffering from severe psychiatric trauma and delusions, had escaped from the hospital and forced a confrontation at the well where he had been found. That Sarah had acted in self-defense when he became violent. No charges were filed. The case was closed. But Sarah knew the truth. The town knew the truth, even if they could not speak it aloud. Something had been beneath the mountains, something ancient and hungry, and for a brief, terrible moment, it had almost broken through into their world. Marcus's body was never recovered from the well. Detective Reeves said it must have fallen into a deeper shaft, some unexplored cave system. Sarah did not correct her. She knew that Marcus's body was not in any cave. It had been pulled down into those impossible depths, reclaimed by the thing that had transformed him. The well was filled in with concrete, tons of it, sealing the shaft permanently. The property was declared structurally unsound and off-limits to the public. The symbols that had been carved throughout the mountains were found and destroyed, though Sarah suspected there were more that remained hidden, waiting. Life in Boone slowly returned to normal. The dead vegetation regrew. The nightmares faded. The feeling of wrongness that had hung over the town dissipated like morning fog. People spoke less and less about the strange events of that Halloween, until eventually it became just another local legend, a story told around campfires to scare tourists. But Sarah remembered. Emma remembered. And on quiet nights, when the wind blew down from the mountains and the old house on Laurel Creek Road creaked and settled, Sarah would sometimes hear that low hum again, that vibration at the edge of perception, a reminder that the Hollow King was still down there, still hungry, still waiting for another chance to rise. She had stopped one convergence, but there would be others. The boundaries between worlds had been weakened, and they would never be as strong as they once were. Somewhere someone else would hear the call from the deep places. Somewhere another vessel would be chosen, transformed, sent back up into the light to open the door. But that was a problem for another day, for another generation perhaps. For now, Sarah focused on the present, on helping Emma heal, on rebuilding their lives from the ashes of their loss. She returned to work at the hospital. Emma continued her studies. They learned to smile again, to find joy in small moments, to honor Marcus's memory not with grief but with the life he had died to protect. On the first anniversary of the convergence, Sarah and Emma went to the cemetery, where they had erected a memorial stone for Marcus. There was no body to bury, but they needed a place to visit, a place to remember the man he had been before the darkness took him. Emma placed flowers on the stone, and Sarah stood in silence thinking about everything they had been through, everything they had lost and survived. "Do you think he's at peace?" Emma asked softly. "Wherever he is?" Sarah thought about the last moment, when Marcus's eyes had been clear and human, When he had smiled and thanked her for freeing him, she thought about his sacrifice, the choice he had made to come back and warn them, even knowing what it would cost him. "Yes," Sarah said, meaning it. "I think he is." They stood together at the gravestone as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The same mountains that had taken Marcus from them, that hid ancient secrets in their depths, that would stand long after Sarah and Emma and everyone they knew had turned to dust. But for now, in this moment, they were just two women mourning a man they had loved, finding comfort in each other's presence, choosing to face whatever came next together, because that was what family did. They endured, they survived, they held on to each other even when the darkness pressed in from all sides, and somewhere deep beneath the mountains, in places where light had never reached and never would, the Hollow King waited, patient, eternal, hungry. But today was not its day. Today belonged to the living, to the survivors, to Sarah and Emma Webb, who had looked into the abyss and refused to let it consume them. Today, they chose hope. They chose life. They chose to believe that love and courage could stand against the darkness, at least for a little while longer, and sometimes that was enough. The end.